Excellent. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So hi, everyone. Good morning again. My name is Mar Velez, Director of Policy with the Latino Coalition for a Healthy California. Buenos días a todos, todes. Mi nombre es Mar Velez, Directora de Políticas con la Coalición Latina para una California Saludable. Y estamos muy felices en verlos. We're so happy to see everyone here. Before we go any further, I would like to turn it over to our interpreter to provide instructions to access the call in Spanish. So ahorita vamos a presentar las instrucciones para escuchar en español.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. We're offering live interpretation in Spanish during this meeting. If you wish to hear the Spanish interpretation, please click the interpretation button at the bottom right of your Zoom screen, which is not appearing yet. It's going to appear once that it's activated. You will see a little globe icon. That's where you're going to click, and you will select your language of choice, either English or Spanish, but make sure that you choose one. Hola a todos, ¿cómo están? Estamos ofreciendo interpretación en vivo en español durante esta reunión. Si usted desea escuchar la interpretación en español, haga clic en el botón de interpretación, que en este momento no lo va a ver, lo va a ver una vez que ya esté activada la interpretación. Se va a la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla Zoom. Ahí usted va a ver un icono del globo terráqueo. Ahí presione y usted va a seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia, ya sea inglés o español. Si usted se está uniendo a través de una aplicación Zoom por un smartphone, entonces tiene que seleccionar su idioma en los tres puntitos que se llama More o Más, que se encuentran en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla. Usted ahí va a seleccionar Language Interpretation o interpretación del idioma. Luego usted escoge Spanish o español y le presiona donde dice Done o listo. Y si usted únicamente quiere escuchar a los intérpretes y no a los oradores originales, asegúrese de hacerle clic donde diga silenciar audio original. Todos deben de escoger un idioma. No se queden en la posición de preapagado determinada. Todos tienen que escoger o español o inglés. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to stop sharing screen. And have we turned on interpretation?
Not yet. I'm not assigned yet.
Okay, we'll go ahead and the team, if we can turn on interpretation.
Yes, we're troubleshooting.
Okay, and it looks like we're still trying to get the little globe icon at the bottom. Estamos dando unos segundos para que se presente la interpretación.
I think one of the important things to notice for you guys to enable it, to make sure that the interpretation is enabled. If Mr. Roberts should see that says enable interpretation, and if it is enabled, he's going to see a globe icon. That's where he's going to select it, so he can click on it, and then he needs to activate it. Oh, that's all he has to do, activate the interpretation.
Thank you for that. It's currently not giving me any options to press. I do see the globe. It's just not giving me.
Okay, you do see the globe, so that means that it is enabled. And then what happens when you go to your settings or controls? Does something pop up for interpretation?
Not at the moment.
Because if you're seeing the globe, that means that the interpretation is enabled. So normally, if you select what happens when you select the globe icon?
It doesn't do anything at the moment. We're getting another staff member to support with troubleshooting at the moment.
Oh, it should. Oh, it's normally very easy, like to do it. You just select it, activate it, and done. When you go to your settings or your controls, do you see interpretation there?
Let me support a little bit here. Yes, interpret. Here it is. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience on this. And then give me 1 second to set you up. Gracias a todos por su paciencia en esto. Ok, entonces tenemos a Gabriela para español y luego para inglés. ¿A español tenemos a alguien más o nada más está?
Yo estoy haciendo todo, solamente yo voy a cambiarme de un canal al otro, pero yo todavía no estoy asignada como intérprete, entonces
Ay, disculpa, no la quise cortar en ese momento. Muchas gracias, Gabriela, por su apoyo. Y está hecho ahora la interpretación. Y entonces, una vez más, el icono del globito está abajo y pueden presionar para el canal español para poder escuchar a Gabriela interpretar esta sesión. Muchísimas gracias a todos por su paciencia.
Thank you so much, everyone, for troubleshooting that. So yes, I am seeing a globe icon at the bottom of my screen here, and I'm seeing a question for English. Do we need to select a language? And the answer is yes. Please go ahead and select the language in which you would like to hear this conversation. It's important that you select at least one language, either English or Spanish. And so I'm hoping that at this point, we are all listening in the language that we prefer. It says, please update so we can provide. Okay, great. I just say the captions in Spanish. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And this is, you know, the beautiful thing about and complicated thing about exactly what we're going to talk about today, which is Latine and Indigenous Mesoamericans and language, right? Along with the diversity of ethnicities and racial backgrounds, we also have a diverse group of languages that so many of us speak. And I see Paula's hand really quickly. Yes, Paula.
Yes, I just wanted to mention really quick for folks that would like English interpretation should someone share in Spanish. You can go ahead and press on the interpretation globe as well and click on the channel for English. Just wanted to share that really quick. I saw that question on the comments.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paula. Okay, great. So I think we're good to go now. Thank you so much for your patience. Again, my name is Mar Velez. I will be moderating today's conversation. And just want to thank our interpreters for providing that service and that access. So let's get into it. Last year, the Latino Coalition for a Healthy California, or LCHC, the Mixteco Indígena Community Organizing Project, or MICOP, the Centro Binacional para el Desarrollo Indígena Oaxaqueño, or CBDIO, and Comunidades Indígenas en Liderazgo, or CIELO, introduced a groundbreaking piece of legislation, the Latine and Indigenous Disparities Reduction Act, or known last year as Senate Bill 435. The bill would disaggregate data for Latinas in California, who currently make up 40% of our state's population, and would, for the first time ever, collect demographic and language data for Indigenous Mesoamericans, such as Zapotecos, Triqui, and Mayans, who do not identify as Latino. The bill had unanimous support from both the Senate and the Assembly and made it all the way to the governor's desk. Unfortunately, Governor Newsom vetoed SB 435, citing that it would, quote, be premature for California to pass legislation related to data disaggregation when the federal government is scheduled to release updates to federal race and ethnicity standards this summer. Today, we are here to announce the reintroduction of the Latine and Indigenous Disparities Reduction Act, this year known as Senate Bill 1016, and discuss why it is critical for California, the state with the largest Latina population in the country, and with the fastest growing Indigenous Mesoamerican community, to lead the way to specifically collect and disaggregate data for these communities. We thank the California legislature for their support last year and hope that we can once again put this bill back on the governor's desk. And when the time comes, we urge Governor Newsom to sign this bill into law. Today, many Indigenous community members cannot access health or social services due to language barriers. We've also heard the need for more information on these communities from county workers so they can appropriately provide services to clients. And we can achieve all of this, but first, we need to collect the data. And that is what SB 1016 will do. We have representatives from co-sponsoring organizations to share with you all why it is urgent for California to begin to recognize the diversity of our communities. And as we hear from our speakers, I want to also remind everyone to please interact with each other and the panelists through the chat. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the panel, but we also have chat monitors who will be scanning the chat in case you drop your questions throughout the conversation. So please feel free to drop them in the chat as well. So with that, I want to transition over to our speakers. And I want to just start off by saying that we originally had Senator Lena Gonzalez scheduled to be here. However, due to legislative obligations, she will not be able to join. However, for the reporters in the room, we do want to encourage you to still share the questions that you might have for the senator, and we will make sure to get those questions to her. And I would also like to just share a quote that the senator provided. Latinos make up 40% of the California population. They are among the most culturally, linguistically, and racially diverse populations in the United States and have diverse health outcomes. However, the state continues to treat this population as a monolith and ignores the different health and life outcomes of Latino subgroups based on their differences in ethnicity, culture, and language, said Senator Lena Gonzalez. SB 1016 takes the critical and necessary first step to uncover trends and potential disparities that are often hidden in aggregated numbers for Latinos and Indigenous Mesoamericans in California. We want to thank Senator Lena Gonzalez for her leadership and for being a champion for data equity for Latine and Indigenous Mesoamericans. Thank you so much, Senator Lena Gonzalez. And without further ado, I want to turn it over to our incredible panel. With us today, we have Arsenio Lopez, Executive Director of the Mixteco Indígena Community Organizing Project, or MICOP. We have Dr. Saraí Martínez, Executive Director of the Centro Binacional para el Desarrollo Indígena Oaxaqueño, or CBDIO. We also have Dr. Cecia Aquino, Executive Director of the Latino Coalition for a Healthy California, or LCHC. And we also have Odilia Romero, Executive Director of Comunidades Indígenas en Liderazgo, or CIELO. And I believe she has joined. She's traveling right now, but I hope that she's in the room. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to start off with Dr. Cecia Aquino. Can you tell us what SB 1016 aims to achieve? What is data disaggregation? And what message do you have for Governor Newsom, who vetoed this bill last year?
Thank you so much. Hola, hola, buenos dias. Thank you everybody for joining us today. You know, this bill is about justice, it's about unity, it's about love. So if you are in this room today, we know that we share those values with you. So thank you for joining us. SB 1016 is a fight for justice for our Indigenous Mesoamerican communities, our Latine subgroups, to make sure that we are taking care of our population. You know, we often talk about health disparities, and disparities like to hide in the minute details. So when we bucket ourselves into this larger group, a lot of those details get hidden, and we're unable to really target those issues in a way that is more strategic and time efficient. So let me paint a picture for us. Suppose you're a doctor and your patient shows up and says, I'm in pain. You say, okay, well, tell me more. Where does it hurt? You get no response from your patient. You could treat their arm, you could treat their head, their body, but if you don't have those details, you can spend a lot of time, a lot of money in ways that are inefficient, ineffective, and costly at the end of the day. So you need a targeted approach, right? It would be so much easier if that patient showed up and said, I have a broken arm. Boom, you have your solution, you have your strategy, you know how to approach it. It's the same thing with data disaggregation. We make up 40% of the population. That's almost 60 million Latinos in California and our Indigenous Mesoamerican communities. So if you think about that large proportion, we need a targeted approach to figure out what is going on, who needs the care, how do we carry it out, right? And with that disaggregated data, we would have that insight to be able to say, this is the right strategy, this is the right approach, this is the type of investment that we need to move forward on ensuring that we're addressing those issues. So this bill really is also about partnership. As Mar mentioned, last year we moved through the legislature with unanimous support, powerful support from our advocates, our partners in the work, working hand in hand with other disenfranchised communities, knowing that when we address and move forward the conversation on health justice for one group, we're also increasing health justice for all of us here in California. In short, the bill will collect and disaggregate data from state departments, including CDPH and CDSS. We're looking to collect data at that individual level for major Mesoamerican indigenous nations, including, but not limited to, Maya, Aztec, Mixteco, Zapoteco, Triqui. Also major Latino groups, such as Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, you name it. But we're not stopping there. We know that the language that we speak, the way that we look, and how we present in a doctor's office, in a dental office, at the CalFresh office, right, has an effect on how we get seen, how we get treated. And so we're also being intentional to collect data on Indigenous Mesoamerican languages, such as Zapoteco, Quiche, Triqui, Chatino, and many more. You know, Mar, you asked me, what is my message for Governor Newsom? You know, we are lucky and privileged to live in a state that cares about public health. Together in partnership with the legislature, advocates, the governor, we have been able to move forward amazing and powerful work, such as the Health for All campaign. In order for us to continue that legacy, data disaggregation is needed. It is a needed infrastructure that we need. And we agree on data being a priority. We hear our governor, we hear other folks talking about how important making those data sound decisions are. So we're simply saying it's time. It's time to collect data for Latinos and Indigenous Mesoamerican communities. We, again, represent that 40% of the population. And in order for all of our governor's initiatives around behavioral health, around childcare, these amazing and unique initiatives need this data disaggregation to be successful. And so what do we say? Let's not wait. California is a leader across the nation. We do not have to wait for those federal policies. We understand and we hear the concerns from the governor and his office in terms of alignment, but there is so much that we can do, and we don't have to wait for those changes to occur for us to enact and be able to be responsive to the population that we have in the state. Additionally, OMB is moving at a different pace, let's just say. So it will take not months, it can be years for these changes to take effect. So all we're saying is we can't wait. We saw it during COVID-19, the pandemic, right? We have climate change crises, be it the fires, flooding. There are emergencies that have pushed us to be more intentional around our data approach. And we cannot wait for the health and the well-being of our communities for data disaggregation to occur. So we really are at this intersection of saying it's time. We've been able to do it. We have an amazing blueprint to follow with our AAPI community, who has been able to enact this work for amazing AAPI communities and their specific needs. So we're just saying Latinos are also there. We are working hand in hand to make sure that we are advancing health equity. And this is a really easy step for us to take together to achieve that health equity. I'll also add that in times of budget constraints, data is critical to make those effective and efficient decisions. So SB 1016 actually offers us that infrastructure to collect detailed data on the largest ethnic and racial demographic in California to make sure that the decisions that we're taking this year and on are sound, effective, and successful. I'll pause there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aquino. I really appreciate what you said about California being a leader. We have been that leader, and I'm seeing in the chat that, you know, California leads and the federal government follows. So as we wait for these federal standards to be updated, we know that California can go beyond whatever the federal government establishes. So the time is now. Really, we've seen, as you've said, through the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing crises that we face every day in terms of climate change and other crises, that we need more information on our communities. Disaggregated data is a tool to make better decisions and more effective decisions for our state. So thank you so much, Dr. Aquino. With that, I do want to turn it over to Arsenio. Arsenio, part of the goal of SB 1016 is to recognize Indigenous Mesoamericans as their own community and identity. And this, of course, includes the rich, diverse number of Indigenous languages spoken. I want to turn it over to you and ask you, can you share a little bit more about MICOP and also tell us who Indigenous Mesoamericans are? Why do we need to start collecting data specifically on this community outside of what we know of the label of Latine, Latino, Latina?
Muchas gracias por la invitación y es un placer para mí estar de nuevo aquí con ustedes. Yo soy parte de la organización comunitaria de Proyecto Mixteco Indígena en el condado de Ventura, Santa Bárbara y San Luis Obispo. En español los acronyms es MICOP. Somos una organización que está trabajando con la comunidad indígena migrante. En la mayoría de nosotros venimos de lo que son las partes suroestes de México, de los estados de Oaxaca, Guerrero, Michoacán. Pues las comunidades mesoamericanas o naciones mesoamericanas, pues somos nuestros individuos o personas que hemos estado en este continente que es conocido como el continente de América por miles de años. No somos personas que acabamos de llegar o que somos nuevos. Hemos estado aquí en esas tierras habitando desde el norte al sur, navegando, emigrando por miles de años. Tenemos nuestras propias lenguas indígenas, no son dialectos, es algo que todavía en nuestras propias comunidades son temas de conversación, ya que insistimos en categorizar las lenguas indígenas como dialectos. Obviamente, como lenguas o como idiomas, nuestras lenguas tienen sus variantes o sus dialectales. Es algo que continuamos educando e informando. Entonces, como comunidades mesoamericanas, tenemos nuestras propias lenguas indígenas, propias visiones, culturas, tradiciones, que obviamente que a través de ya varios cientos de años, desde la invasión española en México, hemos estado conviviendo con nuevas culturas y estar todavía en este trabajo de el aprendizaje del idioma español. Lamentablemente, cuando nosotros venimos de este lado de la frontera y nos identificamos como mexicanos, hay esta percepción de que todo el mexicano habla el español, cuando en realidad México es una de de los países con mayor diversidad cultural y lingüística. Solamente en el país mexicano tenemos 68 naciones indígenas. Cada una de estas naciones con sus propios idiomas que no nos comunicamos. Por ejemplo, el que habla el zapoteco no se puede comunicar con el que habla el mixteco en la lengua mixteca o zapoteco. A través de estos años hemos aprendido que pues la lengua común sería el español. Ah, pero cada una de esas lenguas son únicas y de nuevo tienen sus propias variantes. Solamente en el estado de Oaxaca, que es uno de los estados donde el mayor número de comunidades indígenas que viven en el estado de California, 17 naciones indígenas de las 68 están en el estado de Oaxaca, lo cual hace el estado de Oaxaca uno de los estados con mayor diversidad de nuevo cultural y lingüístico de lo que es México. Am, y por eso, por alguna razón, en California se le conoce como Oaxaca, California, porque estamos haciendo de ese estado nuestro segundo estado en cuestión de números. Am, en ese estado tenemos la comunidad mixtecos, zapotecos y otras comunidades indígenas, lo cual algunos líderes indígenas, y soy parte de esta narrativa en cuestión de el término latino, latina, latinex, pudiera representar hasta un cierto nivel un peligro o estar siendo un peligro, una situación que amenaza con borrar e invisibilizar a las comunidades indígenas como mencionamos al zapoteco, el mixteco, el maya, el guave y otras, la comunidad triqui, otra comunidad náhuatl, varias docenas de comunidades indígenas que se están quedando atrapados dentro de la categoría de lo que es el término latinex o latino, latina. Ah, Solamente para darles un ejemplo, en lo que le llaman el US Census Bureau, está diciendo que 20,000 personas son indígenas, cuando solamente para ponerles en contexto, acabamos de hacer un estudio demográfico en lo que es el condado de San Luis Obispo, con comunidades indígenas que trabajan en el campo, el cual hemos identificado 8,000 personas de comunidades indígenas de la nación mixteca. Solamente en el pequeña ciudad de San Luis Obispo, alrededor de San Luis, perdón, la ciudad de Paso Robles, alrededor del condado de San Luis Obispo. Hay un estudio que creo que es el único estudio que se ha establecido o se ha conocido, que es el estudio de comunidades indígenas campesinas en California, The Indigenous Farm Worker Study. Eso fue realizado en el 2009 o en el 2010 aproximadamente, estamos hablando más de 10 años. Es el único estudio que se conoce formalmente que contabiliza a comunidades indígenas que trabajan en la industria de la agricultura en California, donde identifica 170,000 trabajadores que vienen de comunidades indígenas de las partes de los diferentes estados del sur de México. Entonces, esto nos contradice con esta estadística del US Census Bureau, y esto también nos da una imagen de lo que significa esa situación de la importancia de segregar los datos dentro del término Latinx e identificar a las comunidades por sus comunidades indígenas, lo cual hasta ahorita sigue siendo una situación muy difícil de navegar en las cortes, en los distritos escolares, agencias de salud y otras agencias aún siguen teniendo el reto de crear programas que estén culturalmente y lingüísticamente apropiados para poder servir a las comunidades indígenas que están en sus áreas, porque cuando les pedimos que es necesario esos programas, siempre vienen con la razón de que no sabían, que pensaban que todas las personas que les están dando servicios hablan el español o hablan el inglés o hablan otros idiomas, pero no lenguas indígenas. Entonces, A veces este trabajo es muy importante porque muchas de las veces el no ser números, de nuevo estamos invisibilizados y el cual hemos visto en la situación de COVID que eso pudiera representar entre lo que es la vida y la muerte en una situación de interpretación, por ejemplo. Si no se le está dando la interpretación correcta a una persona que no habla el español, se piensa que habla el español y posiblemente habla una lengua indígena. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Arsenio. Thank you so much for sharing that. I do want to just highlight a little bit of what you talked about in terms of the several different languages that we need additional resources for in order to provide the right types of services in the right language. Language access is a human right. We cannot, disguise it or make it seem like folks, deserve anything less. Folks need to know what, instructions, what kinds of health protocols are being communicated to them. And if they don't have access to an interpreter, then there's a lot of health inequities that can be of consequence because of that. And so really appreciate what you're saying here in terms of just the language diversity within just, what you mentioned, Oaxaca, et cetera. So we need to learn more. Our state needs to be educated a lot more on who Indigenous people are. So thank you so much for sharing that. Along those same lines, we do have a question here for Dr. Sarai Martinez, Executive Director of CBDIO. And on that vein of public health, can you tell us more about the impacts of the lack of data for Indigenous Mesoamericans during the height of COVID? And what about in more recent emergencies, such as the floods or any other climate change related crises? Can you tell us more about what those consequences look like?
Yes, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Sarai Martinez. I am the Executive Director with Centro Binacional para el Desarrollo Indígena Oaxaqueño, which is a community-based organization that works with Indigenous farm workers in the Central Valley and also the Central Coast, covering two major agricultural regions in the state. The response is that it's a really inaccurate. See, now I can't get the words. It's not a proper response from county governments if we don't have this data. And let alone, like a lot of the times we think about like, oh, our communities are invisible, but the reality is that that's not what we hear from county counterparts. They know that they don't have the proper data to properly deliver services. So what happens when we don't have the data is that we put at risk the lives of our communities. So it happened with COVID. We are fortunate enough that we have organizations like MyCop, like Cielo, that covered, and among us, we cover most of the state. But yet there's some areas where even as the Centro Binacional within Monterey County, that is a huge county, we don't have the capacity to serve throughout. But we know that this lack of information for county officials, for local officials, really impacts how we respond. And through COVID, we saw it. So we had to be those emergency responders that had to be out there training Indigenous community workers, community health workers to be given those vital information. Otherwise, like our community will be left behind. And I think the worst consequence, like people could die because of it. We see it throughout the work that we do. The language access is an issue for our community to have justice. So we need to make sure that this bill passes to start with one step. We're not asking for, to provide language access across state programs, even resources, or something as basic as like workers' rights, that sometimes we also struggle with that. But this bill will provide those health data points for our elected officials, for our county officials to make the right decisions, to create the proper not investment, but response. And I think now, I think also it was mentioned earlier that we continue to see climate emergencies, climate disasters. And we also have seen and witnessed how, because of the lack of data, we don't have the proper response. We saw it in multiple counties like Tulare County, that many of those emergency evacuation orders were given in Spanish or English. And for many of our Indigenous farm worker community members, they couldn't get that information. They were afraid to go into the shelters because they didn't have the information about how this was beneficial for them and how it was not going to be used against them because of the lack of status or documents. So there was a lot of information. Counties didn't know how to respond, and having this information is critical for that. Not only because you provide this language access, but I think it's also Arsenio that mentioned within one language, there's multiple variations. So if you don't capture this data at the county level, even though you say like, oh, I have a Mixteco population that we need to serve, you don't know what language from that Mixteco variation to cover. So like having this information really helps shape our response when it comes to climate or health emergencies. So I think we continue to, I think there was a question from the chat that I saw, like, what are we doing to the governor? And we want to make sure that we continue to reach out to him. Again, last year, the bill passed with unanimous support because we have seen it, we hear it at the local level. So now it's really, we're asking everyone here to continue to help us get the message to the governor, either through this channel, through your individual network, to make sure that SB 1016 gets signed. Again, it's one small step to the right direction. We're not, this bill, like it really has an impact. It also sets precedent on what could be possible, but we're not asking for a lot. So we definitely urge everyone to join forces and to ask the governor to sign this bill that we needed. I think with that, I don't know if I answered your questions, Mara, if you have any more that you want me to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Sarai. And just want to really appreciate your point around this only being the first step. We are not, as you're saying, asking for an entire infrastructure to be built overnight. We're saying this is the first step. We cannot do anything without the data. And we know that this governor really appreciates data-driven solutions. That's exactly what this is. It's a data-driven solution that will help us make better decisions, to allocate resources effectively, to get the services in language that are needed by our community. This is the reality of California. Let's meet California where it's at. Let's meet Indigenous Mesoamerican folks where they're at. Let's understand that Latinas are diverse, right? There's a lot of health inequities hidden in aggregated data. So let's actually achieve health equity through data disaggregation. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarai Martinez. And with that, I want to turn it over to Odilia Romero of Cielo. Odilia, you talk about data violence. What is data violence, and what is at stake for Indigenous communities if Governor Newsom does not sign this piece of legislation into law?
Adios, George Krende Bajirenga of Shalajoda Jack Chen, Neto Bene Benesta, Yeshinga Benesh Junshinga. You know, for us, it's important, and I'm not going to interpret what I just said, so good luck. I said it slow enough for you to understand, so have a great day with that. So one of those things that it's important, you know, for us to be recognized, for our language rights to be recognized, for it to become a fundamental human right. In every place we go, in every institution we go, we need to exist in data. And if we don't exist in data, we're not here. And if we're not here, there's no services for us in our indigenous languages. So this is what we define at Cielo as a statistical genocide. If we're not here in numbers, we don't exist, there's no services. And it hasn't been important to institutions, to the movement, to provide indigenous language interpreters because they see it as a service. And we need to see it as a fundamental human right for it to exist. And we need the governor to be on board to recognize our human rights through language as indigenous people. And we all have to do that within our movement. If our movement doesn't recognize us as indigenous people and continue to impose and force us to accept the label of Latino as an identity, and yes, we do take it, and because it's a survival mechanism to exist, right? But within that existence, there is a lot of violence. There's a lot of violence against indigenous people, what we call language violence. Because when you go to a hospital and you're not provided an interpreter in your language, which is your fundamental human right, and you give your child the wrong amount of prescription, before you know it, there's social services involved. Before you know it, you're in court, and they're sending you to parenting classes that you're not understanding. And because you're not understanding, you have no emotions. When you go back to court, your kids have been removed. And when they have been removed, they go through trauma in foster care and many terrible experiences. So with that, that's what we define as language violence. This is a violence through language against indigenous communities. And for this to stop and for it to be recognized as a fundamental human right to have interpretation in your language, anywhere you go in California, the governor needs to be on board. He needs to be on board in signing this bill and recognize the contribution of indigenous people throughout California, from San Diego border all the way to the end of California up north, right? There are indigenous people. When we talk about the food industry, we are in Southern California and we service LA County. When we talk about the service industry, you know, there are indigenous people. From the busboys, from the chefs, from the waiter are indigenous people. You know, they fed LA County during the pandemic. When we talk to up north, you know, the wine industry, the strawberry industry, we contribute, but there's no exact numbers of how many of us are there because there's no data. Cielo is the first organization that creates data of existence of indigenous people across the US here in LA County. Our map that we created is historic because we had to create it, otherwise it would have never been done. And we need to change that. We need the governor to be supporting our existence just like we support the existence of California as a state that provides I don't know what happened. Sorry, friends, I don't know how to do this. I
think we might have lost Odilia, but she was, oh man, I'm so sorry that we lost her, but I really want to thank her. Is she back? Okay. We'll see if Odilia is able to join us again, but really appreciate her points around the fact that without this data, without collecting the data, you know, in some cases, really though, and it's just, there is no information, and therefore we don't exist. That's the way that county services run, is through information. So if we don't have that information, how are we supposed to properly serve our communities? So hopefully, that might be her. Odilia, are you back? Okay, let me know if Odilia, you're back. If not, I'd like to turn it over to back to our panelists. We do have a few questions.
I'm back. I'm back.
Okay. Okay,
I
the
don't know
floor is
what
yours. Thank you.
happened. And yeah, I don't. I'm gonna turn off my phone, so I don't know what happened. So I'm sorry about that, but I think the governor needs to be on board and recognize our existence, just like our existence and our contributions. California exists because Indigenous people exist. We are in the first line workers, high skilled workers, and we're not counted. We're not in the data. Services are not given to us in our language. What's going to happen when an earthquake hits? Who's going to be left out? Who was left out during the pandemic? If it wasn't for the organizations doing the work, I don't know the consequences, the more drastic, fatal consequences we would have had if we didn't exist as an organization. So I think the governor needs to sign this bill, needs to be an ally of Indigenous people because we contribute to your state. Your state exists because we are here. And with that, I have to tell you all, we're going to continue doing the work as Indigenous organizations, and we're going to continue fighting for existence in data. And as far as Cielo Gold, we're going to continue fighting for access to an interpreter is going to become a fundamental human right and to end the language of violence against Indigenous people. And we're doing that today. Actually, you are the first people to see these amazing, and you could look at it once, this billboard campaign that we're launching in LA County, because since we don't exist in data, we don't exist, therefore there's no services in Indigenous languages, and Indigenous people are having a hard time in hospitals, in schools. The schools in LA, we know, we have identified the school that 90% of it is Indigenous kids, and they're not getting the services, the special ed kids. Why? Because we don't exist in numbers, and we continue to be pushed as Latinos. So with that, I end, and I think I had a question here, or is there going to be a Q&A after? I saw a question from one of the journalists.
Yes, and we can turn it over to the Q&A portion. Thank you so much, Odilia, for joining us and for providing, all of those powerful words around the realities of Indigenous folks, and what are the consequences if we do not start to collect that information. So I want to turn it over to questions. We do have a question here from Mireya Olivera. ¿Qué posibilidades hay que la propuesta sea aprobada este año si hay déficit en... So yeah, so what's the possibility that SB 1016 will be signed into law, given that there's already been a deficit projected for the state? And I'll open it up to all of our panelists if anybody wants to take a stab at that question.
Let me just quickly jump in here, and honestly, such an honor to be amongst you all. Thank you for all the work that you all do and that we now get to do this together. I'll just share, and a lot of our panelists hinted at this, but it's just the fact that our economic contributions are so powerful. There is this intricate link between our health and our economy. In 2023, the California Latino gross domestic income reached $682 billion. That's a huge portion. If we were to just look at that Latino economy in a vacuum, we would be the 21st largest economy in the world. That sits between the economies of Poland and Switzerland. So think about how powerful we are, right? So when we're having these conversations about funding and budget deficits, these are decisions that the data is clearly indicating here that in order for that California economic prosperity to continue, you need to keep our Indigenous Mesoamerican and Latina population healthy. Otherwise, the economy will suffer. And so it's not only a moral imperative to do this, but also a strategic move to bolster the California economy, not just this year, but for years to come. So it really behooves us to do this work.
Thank you, Dr. Aquino. Any other additional responses? Great. I'll just add and say that, whenever there's a deficit, somehow there's still money for other things. And this is absolutely an investment, right? For us to invest into understanding the largest ethnic group in the state and to start recognizing Indigenous Mesoamericans. So we will keep fighting because we know that, and the greasy wheel, right? We need to be that greasy wheel to get what we need for our communities. An additional question here, ¿qué aliados o qué sería lo más importante de tener para lograr el apoyo? That's okay. So what's the most important thing to, get the governor on our side?
Well, even though we are asking for the recognition of Indigenous people, we also believe that the Latinos have the right to their movement, but in their movement that they cannot erase our existence as Indigenous people. So I think this is where we build an allyship, right? You love our clothes, but wearing it doesn't translate to you supporting our right. Let's make that change. Let's build solidarity together. You wear our huipil, I want you to call the governor and push for this bill. You like our mezcal? I want you to call the governor to get this bill on board, right? So I think we need to see that solidarity in action more than in the folkloric sense. And again, we support your movement. You have a right to your movement, but we also have the right to exist and create our own movement, and we create allyships.
And what? Oh, go ahead, Arsenio.
Oh no, the only thing I'm building on what Odilia just touched, I think small actions makes a big differences, and I think it starts with your own family, start with your friends. I think it's really important to be really intentional on giving or making sure that the creating spaces where the Indigenous voices are being heard, that people who is creating their own narratives, in this case, are Indigenous people, Indigenous leaders who are particularly from these Indigenous Mesoamerican nations we're talking about. I think it makes a huge difference to make sure that aliados create that space and be on their side of these leaders, but just, yeah, I think that's, that actions like that, it's also visibility, right? And yeah, I'll just say that.
And just to quickly jump in, what can you do? Join our campaign. We have a toolkit. There are various points of contact during the legislative cycle where we'll need your voice. We'll need you to share our stories, to be able to share about this important work that we're doing. We'll put the resources in the link. There are ways for you to call in, call the governor, support SB 1016, share it across your platforms. The louder we are, right, and together we're stronger, we'll get through the finish line with that success.
Thanks, everyone. And I'm seeing just some additional comments in the chat. We need TV channels to also give us one of their HD channels to have Indigenous voices and stories. Yes, let's use the airwaves, use all of our channels to really let folks know that there's a movement going on here in California, right? To recognize Indigenous Mesoamericans, to recognize the diversity within the Latino, Latina community. We're not a monolith. We're not just one label. There's beautiful differences amongst all of us. So please let your communities know, your networks know, this is the year that we will get this bill signed into law. Really, really have faith in the power of the people that you see on screen right now. So thank you so much. So I think we might have, or I'm seeing we're at 10:59. Unfortunately, we'll have to end the Q&A there because we do want to, as folks have already asked, share with you all some resources for you all to plug into the movement, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. We do have, we've shared this in the chat, but I do want to just put this up. We have a toolkit ready for you all to utilize, to plug into. If you scan the QR code or put that link in your browser, it'll lead you to an entire toolkit with great graphics, great information to educate your networks about Indigenous Mesoamericans, about the diversity within the Latina community. There's also going to be a link to a letter of support. So SB 1016 has already been referred to 2 committees in the Senate. It has been referred to the Health Committee and the Human Services Committee. We don't have a date just yet for when those committees will be scheduled, when we will appear. But once we have that information, we will definitely let you know. But you can submit a letter of support today. There's no need to wait for us to be scheduled. Send that letter of support on behalf of your organization today. Last year, we had over 60 letters of support. Let's double that this year, right? Let's get 120. Let's get 150 letters of support. Let's really let the governor and the legislature know that we need this today. California supports SB 1016. And with that, muchas gracias. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be seeing you in the fight for SB 1016, for data disaggregation, for Indigenous communities and Latina communities. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Gracias.
Oh, thanks for joining. Thank you.
Nos vemos pronto.
Nos
Hasta luego.
vemos. Thank you. Adiós. Hey, folks. A few folks are left here. Okay, thank you so much, Linguistica, for all of your assistance, and sorry for the troubleshooting. I think we got through. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we staying on for a couple moments or?
Yeah, it'd be good.
Great
Okay.
job, y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just us. Yeah, yay! That
I
was.
know it's still recording.
Oh, stop. Stop the